Have you ever felt like you're doing a lot of work on your systems, but when you stop and look back, you can't actually tell what's improved? Not because nothing has changed, but because there's no record of the change. So every quarter feels like starting over, every reset feels disconnected from the last one, and progress feels fuzzy. That's not a motivation problem. It's not a discipline problem. It's a visibility problem. Today, we're fixing that with one of the most overlooked, most powerful tools in operational maturity, the history log. Welcome back to Tech Talks with Grace, the show where we turn operational chaos into clarity one system at a time. Over the last several episodes, you've done real foundational work. You've learned how to reset your systems each quarter. You've measured your data integrity. You've taken action using guided checklists. But there's one critical piece missing, and without it, progress never sticks. Today's episode is called Tracking Your Progress with the History Log. So by the end of this episode, you'll know what a history log actually is and what it's not, why most businesses feel stuck even when they're improving, how to use a simple log to identify real trends over time, and how to turn past resets into future clarity. This episode is about making progress visible. So you stop repeating work, stop second guessing your decisions and every decision you make, and start building momentum that compounds. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first section. Why does progress feel invisible? We'll start with a hard truth here, and that is most businesses are improving. They just don't remember how they improved. So here's what usually happens. You notice friction, you clean something up, you standardize a field, you fix an automation, you clarify ownership, and then time passes. New problems appear, new priorities surface, another quarter rolls around, and suddenly you're thinking, why does it still feel messy? Did we even make progress last quarter? Are we actually moving forward? So the problem isn't lack of improvement. The problem is lack of memory. Businesses don't fail because they don't improve. They fail because improvements aren't tracked, named, or reviewed. Without a record, you repeat the same fixes. You underestimate how far you've come, you overreact to short-term friction, and you make decisions emotionally instead of strategically. And so that's where the history log comes in. So what the history log is and is not. Let's define this clearly because simplicity is always the point. What the history log is? The history log is a living record of system-level changes over time. So what does the history log exactly capture? What you changed, when you changed it, why you changed it, and what impact you noticed afterward. If you notice, this is the standard what, when, why, and how, really. So just make sure you understand those very simple points. That's it. That's what a history log is. What you changed, when you changed it, why you changed it, and what impact you noticed afterward. No dashboards, no complicated metrics, no performance theater. It is just your truth over time. Now, what is it not? What the history log is not, it is not a to-do list. This is not your project plan. It is not a KPI dashboard, and it is not a productivity tracker. It's not what you intend to do. It's about what you've already done. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because when businesses only track future plans, they lose perspective. When you track history, you gain confidence. So that brings us to why this log changes how you think. Here's what happens when you start using a history log consistently. The first thing that happens is you stop starting every quarter. You know that reset we talked about in the previous podcast? Instead of starting all over again, The whole concept here is to not restart over every single quarter. So with the history log, instead of saying, okay, what do we need to fix now? You say, here's what we already fixed. What's next? That shift alone changes how strategic your resets become. The second thing, it spots patterns instead of reacting to noise. So when friction shows up, a bottleneck, you can ask, is this new? Or is this a recurring issue? Did we already address something related? Patterns only emerge when history exists. So now that you know patterns emerge only when a history exists, this is something that you can understand because history tends to repeat itself, right? So if you don't review and or have a history log, you will end up repeating the same issues over and over again. The next thing it does for you is it reduces decision fatigue. Instead of redebating the same choices you made, you can see what you've already tried, what worked and what didn't, and then what you've already ruled out. Clarity compounds when memory exists. So that brings us to in my opinion, the most important section, and that is how the history log actually works. Let's make this practical because I like making things practical and actually actionable. Your history log can live anywhere. It can be a simple document, it can be a spreadsheet, a Notion page, a whiteboard in Teams, a shared operations folder. The format really matters less than the consistency of use. But here is the minimum structure to help you understand exactly what you need to have in your history log. For each entry, you need to capture the date or quarter, the system or category, in other words, intake, CRM, delivery, automation, data, etc. What changed, why it changed, and the observed impact. I personally like to have it in spreadsheets because that's easier for me, but a lot of people prefer Teams, and so I have my spreadsheet integrated with Teams, and the history log is just tracked data. Very simple. We don't reinvent the wheel. We don't reset everything all over again. We look at the history log, look at what worked, what didn't, and then the measured or observed impact. That's it. So let me give you an example. Again, I love my examples. So for a quarterly 2 reset, your CRM was the focus. You changed deal stage names to match the real workflow. Why? The reason was sales and delivery were interpreting stages differently. What was the impact? There were fewer handoff errors. We had clearer reporting and faster onboarding. That single entry does more than 10 dashboards ever could. Because guess what? 6 months later, when someone says, hey, should we rename the stages again? You're not guessing, you're referencing history. That brings me to my favorite part. Hopefully it's yours as well, and that is the real world example here. Let's bring this to life. Meet a fictional but very familiar company, ClearPath Consulting. They run quarterly resets, they improve their systems, they care about operations. But every quarter feels heavy, and it felt heavy. So they started a history log. And after 3 quarters, here's what they noticed. Intake had been touched every quarter. CRM fields, they changed them 5 different times. Their delivery workflows had barely been touched or revisited. And most issues tracked or traced back to missing or inconsistent intake data. That's why they kept doing intake or touching it every quarter. Guess what? That changed everything. That one insight in understanding and actually reviewing their history log, instead of fixing what felt loud, they were able to focus fully on one quarter, or focus that one quarter on intake stability. They froze the CRM changes temporarily, and they cleaned their upstream data. For the first time, improvements stuck. The history log didn't just track progress, it revealed the root cause. Let's lock this in with 3 simple actions. I love my actionable takeaways just as much as I love giving you real world examples here. So, step 1, review your history log after each reset. Before planning the next quarter, look back. Ask yourself these 3 questions. what changed, what improved, and what problems stopped appearing. Remember, progress lives in contrast, not intention. Step 2, note patterns, not just actions. Look for repeated fixes, systems that you touch over and over, and areas that never seem to stabilize. Patterns tell you where maturity is missing. Step 3, choose one improvement informed by history. Remember, one improvement, not what feels urgent, not what's loud, but what history suggests will create true leverage for you and your business. That's how you stop reacting and start leading. I think most of you may have noticed by now that my episodes are getting somewhat shorter, and this is intentional at this time. I am trying to make sure that you not just take away what I'm providing to you, but that each one builds on the previous, and also that you're able to take each one of these and in their own take something from them, whether it's the 3 actionable takeaways, the intro, or just a list that helps you do something better this week. The whole point of it is not to provide you with tons and tons or 30 minutes worth of content. My intent initially was to have 20 to 30 minutes of content. However, it does seem like most of this is super heavy information, and I don't want you to feel, 1, overwhelmed, or 2, like you cannot take action after every episode. So each episode will be intentionally short or long, depending on the subject matter. And they do seem to be around 15 minutes max at this time. Some of them may end up at 20 minutes. I don't think I'm ever going to hit 30 minutes. So hopefully that will help you schedule your day, because I do tell you a lot of times to take 30 minutes to take that one micro action that you've scheduled for yourself for that day, for that episode, for that week. With that being said, that brings us to the end of this particular episode, and that is everything to do with progress tracking and your history log. It doesn't need to be complicated, same as the episodes and the way I'm putting them together for you. It needs to be honest, it needs to be visible, and it needs to be remembered. The history log really gives your business something most don't have, a business memory. And businesses with memory make calmer decisions, have better systems, and make faster progress without burning out. This brings us to the end of this pillar. At the very beginning, I may have mentioned to you all that I will have this set up as pillars. They all run in sequence to each other, but you're able to take each podcast on its own. This pillar 3 brings us to the end of the quarterly rhythms and the concept of quarterly resets. You now have a quarterly rhythm that supports long-term clarity. You know how to pause without panic. You know how to reset without erasing your progress. You know how to measure, track, and build on what you've already improved. This is how operational maturity compounds, quietly, intentionally, and over time. And now we move forward. What do we have next? Pillar 4. This is real-world use cases and strategic application. In the very next episode, episode 11, I will be bringing you real-world AI use cases and case studies. What we're going to do in this episode is take everything you've learned so far and ground it in reality. What these systems actually look like inside a real business, where AI fits, where it doesn't, and how strategic application makes the difference between tools that impress and systems that work. Until then, track what you change, honor the progress you've made, and let your systems evolve on purpose. I'm Grace, and this is Tech Talks with Grace.